Hey guys, alright, so next set of videos here are going to be about adding rational numbers. And for this video, I'm focusing specifically on just fractions, because fractions is one type of rational number. And so what we want to do is just practice how to add them together, basically, which sounds easy, but can end up being quite complicated because there's different types of problems. So here is our example, our first problem, example 1. We want to add together 4/5 plus a negative 3/10. So feel free to pause the video if I go too fast here and you need to write some of this down, but I'm going to start flying through this. So 4/5 plus negative 3/10. So here's kind of my thoughts. A couple of things. First off, I see a positive and a negative number. So in my mind, here's my thought bubble. I'm remembering my rules with integers. My rules with integers say when I'm adding different signs, I have to actually subtract when I add different signs. This here. It's a subtraction problem. Subtract. So 4/5 plus negative 3/10 is really 4/5 minus 3/10. But the other thing I'm thinking about in my head is I'm seeing fractions being added together, and I'm remembering that when I add and subtract fractions, I have to have what's called a common denominator. Common denominator. So now we have overlapping things that we've learned. We've learned about common denominators and adding fractions, and we've learned about integers and different signs. So we're going to kind of combine all these rules together. So let's take the fractions and get the common denominator first. 4/5 and 3/10. Well, one way we could do this is we could look at 4/5, and we could remember that if we take a 5 and we times it by 2, 5 times 2 is 10. That would be a great way for us to get our common denominator. Let's times by 2 on top and bottom of this fraction. So we're going to get 8/10, which might make this a lot easier once we have that figured out. So if that's 8/10, what I now have is 8/10 plus negative 3/10. Awesome, common denominators. Now I go to my next rule. Different signs mean I subtract. So really, all I have to figure out is what is 8 minus 3. Because whatever it is, it's going to be over tenths, my common denominator. So 8 minus 3 is 5. So my answer is 5/10. 5/10. And then with fractions, whenever we get an answer, we always simplify. So I'm just about done, but I know 5/10 does simplify because I could divide by 5. 10 divides by 5 evenly. They both do. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So I end up with a final answer of 1/2. 1/2 is my final answer to this problem. So a couple different rules kind of applied there. So let's try another one and talk about another strategy here. So another one we could do is, let's say we had this. Negative 2/3 plus 1/7. Negative 2/3 plus 1/7. Well, again, one of them's negative, one of them's positive. I see different signs. So in my little thought in my head, what I'm kind of thinking is I'm adding with different signs again. So addition with different signs means I'm actually going to be using subtraction. So I'm going to subtract. Something I just have to remember. But I don't have a common denominator here either. 3 and 7 both need common denominators. So in this one, it's a little different than the last problem. I can't just times 3 by a number to get 7. It'd be nice to turn these both into 7s, but I'm not going to be able to do that. Like, what are you going to multiply 3 by? 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. I'm not going to be able to do that. So instead, I'm going to use what I call in class the butterfly effect. I'm going to get a common denominator for 3 and 7 by using my butterfly strategy, which is this. I'll use a different color here so you can see it. I'm going to take 2 times 7 and 1 times 3. And you can see the wings of my butterfly. Now, 2 times 7 is 14. Of course, it's a negative because of the negative sign. And 3 times 1 is 3. So there's the antennae of my butterfly. And we're going to be adding those together. And on the bottom of my butterfly, we have a 3 and a 7. 3 times 7 is 21. So I end up with a problem that looks like this. Negative 14 plus 3 all over 21. Now with different signs, the rule is to subtract. So in my head, I'm thinking, What's 14 minus 3? 14 minus 3 is 11. Now the bigger number is 14 and it's negative, so negative 11 over 21. And that makes up my answer. Now I'll simplify if I can, but what are you going to divide 11 and 21 by? 11 doesn't really divide by anything other than itself. So I don't think I can simplify. I think I'm actually stuck with negative 11 21s as my answer. And I'm done. Okay, so let's look at another one. Example 3. Here's a different problem than all the rest. Negative 5 1/2 plus negative 4/5. Negative 5 1/2 plus negative 4/5. I'm seeing two negative numbers. So in my thought bubble in my head, I'm thinking about, wow, I'm adding. But this time I notice that I'm adding same signs. They're both negative. And with same signs, the rule is you just do addition. You're going to add. You don't have to subtract. But I also see that I have a mixed number and I don't really want to deal with that. So I'm gonna change the mixed number. It's not gonna work for me. So 5 times 2 is 10 plus 1 is 11. This is 11 over 2, 11 halves. It's just, in this case, it's a negative 11 halves because of the negative sign. So I have negative 11 halves plus negative 4/5. And now I know I need a common denominator. So 2 and 5, what's their common denominator? Can I multiply 2 by something to get 5? Could I make 5 my common denominator? And the answer is no, you can't. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. You're not going to get a 5. So again, I'm going for the butterfly effect. And I'm going to make my wings and do 5 times 11 and negative 4 times 2. There's my butterfly. 5 times 11 is 55. But because of the negative sign, I have a negative 55. 4 times 2 is 8. Because of this negative sign right here, I have a negative 8. And at the bottom of my butterfly, 2 times 5 is 10. All right, so basically I have a negative 55 plus a negative 8. All over now, my common denominator is 10. And because they are the same signs, I know addition is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 55 plus 8. So 55 plus 8 is 63 over 10. And these are both negatives, so is the 63. So I get this, negative 63/10, which really is an answer, but I can simplify it. I can put it back into a mixed fraction. So how many 10s go into 63? Well, I know 6 times 10 is 60. So 6 whole 10s fit into 63. So I'm going to have a 6. And if it's 60, and this is 63, my remainder from that, 63 minus 60, is a remainder of 3. So I have a remainder of 3/10. And because the whole thing is negative, I'm going to put my negative out here with my whole number. So negative 6 3/10 is my answer. And I'm done. Okay, so you have to remember when you're adding these fractions together that you have to use your integer rules and you have to have a common denominator. And you can use the butterfly effect, or like that first example, you could just multiply one of the fractions to get the common denominator. It just depends on the problem. Okay, thanks guys.